I was mid-contraction, legs in stirrups, hospital gown soaked through with sweat, when the doctor walked in, looked at his clipboard, and pulled down his mask. And I saw my ex-husband's face, the man who had put divorce papers on our kitchen table 8.5 months ago, the man who had chosen his mother over me, over us, over everything we had built, was now standing at the foot of my hospital bed, staring at a pregnancy he knew absolutely nothing about. For 1 second, nobody breathed. Then another contraction hit, and I screamed, and whatever that moment was, it shattered into pieces across that white hospital floor. And here's the thing nobody tells you about rock bottom. Sometimes it doesn't look like darkness. Sometimes it looks like fluorescent lights and a fetal monitor beeping, and the gray eyes of the man you used to love filling slowly with tears. This is the story of how I drove myself to that hospital alone at 4:52 in the morning, how I kept a secret for 8.5 months that would change everything, and how the worst night of my life became the first night of something I never saw coming. My name is Alicia, and this is where it all begins. The contraction hit at 4:25 in the morning. I grabbed the edge of the mattress, held my breath, and counted. 4 seconds. 8 seconds. It passed. I lay there in the dark, alone, 38 weeks pregnant, staring at the ceiling of an apartment that still smelled faintly of the previous tenant's life. No one was coming to help me. I'd made sure of that. I called the hospital at 4:31, drove myself in at 4:52, checked in, changed into a gown, got strapped to monitors. The nurse, young, kind, professionally hiding her pity, asked if anyone was joining me. No, I said, just me. She nodded like that was a perfectly normal thing. Maybe to her it was. What wasn't normal, what nobody in that hospital could have predicted, was what happened next. Because here's what you need to know before we go any further. The father of my baby had no idea I was pregnant. I'd made that choice deliberately, calmly, and with full knowledge of what it would cost me. I'd spent 8.5 months carrying that decision alongside the weight of everything else. The swollen ankles, the solo appointments, the holidays spent alone, and I'd never once broken, never reached for my phone to call him, never typed a message I didn't delete. His name was Taylor Butler. He was 31 years old, an OB/GYN. Yes, you read that right. And 8.5 months ago, he had put a folder on our kitchen table, slid it across to me like a business document, and told me our marriage was over. 2 years, gone, just like that. I signed the papers the same afternoon, moved out within 2 weeks, found out I was pregnant 10 days after he left, and I told him nothing. The contractions were 4 minutes apart by 6 a.m. The pain was a different category of experience than anything I'd prepared for. Not sharp, exactly, but total, like your entire body becomes one single urgent fact. The nurse came in to check my chart. Your regular OB is unavailable tonight. Dr. Patterson had an emergency. We have someone covering, Dr. Butler. He's excellent, don't worry. I stopped breathing. First name, I said. My voice came out flat. What's his first name? She looked at the chart. Taylor. And then the door opened. He walked in reading a clipboard, scrubs, cap, mask up, completely professional, completely unaware. He crossed the room toward me. He reached up. He pulled down his mask. Taylor Butler looked at me. The clipboard dropped 2 inches before he caught it. Every drop of color left his face. For 1 full second, neither of us moved, neither of us spoke, and the only sound in the room was the steady beep of the fetal monitor. Then a contraction hit, and I screamed, and whatever that moment was, it shattered into pieces. "Do you two know each other?" the nurse asked, carefully. I laughed through the pain. It came out ugly. "We were married," I said, "until he handed me divorce papers 8.5 months ago. But to understand why I never told him, you need to understand who Taylor was before I met him. No, you need to understand his mother." Jeanette Butler was 61 years old, small, impeccably dressed, and the most quietly dangerous person I have ever encountered. She didn't shout, she didn't threaten, she simply repositioned reality slowly and consistently until you found yourself living in a version of your life that she had designed. Taylor and I met the ordinary way: coffee shop, reached for the same thing, laughed about it. He was funny and thoughtful and a little exhausted from residency, and completely genuine in a way I hadn't expected. 6 months later, we were inseparable. A year after that, engaged. The warning signs were there. I chose not to see them. Jeanette bought Taylor a car in our first month of marriage. Expensive, sleek, generous on the surface. But the car came with a condition she never stated, only demonstrated. She called, he drove. Prescription pickup, grocery runs, Sunday dinners that somehow always lasted 3 hours. It wasn't the car. It was never the car. It was the message the car carried. I own the infrastructure of your life, and don't you forget it. She controlled the finances the same way, not overtly, but atmospherically. Comments about our spending, offers of help that arrived wrapped in implication. I just don't want you to struggle. I'm only trying to make things easier. Every act of generosity was a transaction, and the currency was control. I tried to set boundaries. Twice, then 3 times, then more times than I can count. Taylor always said the same thing.
"She means well." 4 words I came to hate more than any others in the English language. The night everything ended, we were at Janot's house for dinner. She'd been talking about a family trip she'd planned. Planned without asking us, planned and presented as decided. I watched Taylor nod along, and something in me finally, quietly, broke. "We can't make that weekend," I said. "Taylor and I have plans." Janot smiled. That smile. "Surely they can move, dear." "Family comes first, Alicia." "I am his family." The table went silent. She looked at me with perfectly calibrated patience and said, "Of course you are. I just meant real family, the kind that was there before you arrived." I looked at Taylor. He looked at his plate. I drove home alone, sat in the kitchen and waited. He came home 2 hours later with that careful blankness on his face that I'd learned to read, the expression that meant Janot had already told him what to think. The next morning, the folder was on the table. Divorce papers. Already signed, his name at the bottom in neat, deliberate ink. I signed them that afternoon. What else was I going to do? 10 days after he moved out, I started feeling nauseous all the time and constantly craved something salty, and I took a pregnancy test on a whim. Sat on the bathroom floor of my new apartment, stared at 2 lines, and didn't move for 45 minutes. Then I called a lawyer. "You're not obligated to tell him yet," she said. "Once the baby is born, custody and support become legal issues. But until then, don't say anything to him yet." I hung up, made my decision. The man who had let his mother end his marriage was not the man I wanted raising my child. Not yet, maybe not ever. If Taylor was going to be a father, he was going to have to become someone different first, someone who could stand on his own, who could choose his child over his mother, who could act out of love instead of obligation. I wasn't going to hand him a baby and hope he figured it out. So I kept the secret for 8.5 months. I worked full-time, attended every appointment alone, spent Thanksgiving eating takeout on my couch, spent Christmas answering polite questions from my friend Dana's family about where the father was. "Not in the picture," I said each time. It got easier to say. It never got easier to mean. Now let's go back to the delivery room. Back in the delivery room, Taylor was trying to be a doctor. You could see the effort, the deliberate professionalism, the controlled breathing, the way he kept his voice steady even as his hands betrayed him with a slight, constant tremor. He checked the monitors, he spoke to the nurse in low tones, he did everything required. But between the medical moments, I could feel him looking at me, not with anger, with something worse, devastation. Don't, I thought. Don't you dare make me feel guilty in this room. At 6:48, the baby's heart rate dipped. Just briefly, just enough. Push now, Taylor said, and all the personal history was gone from his voice. Nothing left but urgency, nothing left but the job. I know you're tired. Push anyway. I pushed. I won't try to describe it accurately because I don't think language is built for it. I'll just say that it was the most extreme experience of my life, and that through all of it, through every wave of pain that wiped thought completely blank, Taylor's voice was the only constant. That's it. You've got this. One more. One more. At 7:03 a.m., my daughter was born. She cried immediately. The nurse placed her on my chest, and I stopped being whoever I'd been before that moment and became something else, something that didn't have a name but felt ancient and irreversible. "Hi," I whispered. My voice was completely gone. "Hi, baby. I'm your mama." I looked up. Taylor was standing at the foot of the bed, and he was crying. Not dramatically, just 2 slow tears, and an expression on his face I had never once seen in 2 years of marriage. It looked like a man understanding for the first time exactly what he had almost lost. He waited until the room was quiet, until the nurse had stepped out and it was just the 3 of us, me, my daughter Emma, and the man who hadn't known he was a father until 20 minutes ago. "You were pregnant when I left. I found out a week after you left. Alicia," his voice broke on my name. "You had a right to know." "Did you?" I looked at him steadily. I was exhausted beyond language, bleeding, shaking, and completely certain. Did the man who let his mother decide to end his marriage have the right to be part of raising a child? Would he have stood up for her? Would he have protected her the way you never protected me? He didn't answer. "I would have stayed," I finally said. "I know. That's exactly why I didn't tell you." 3 days after I brought Emma home, Janot Butler declared war. I was in my apartment learning what newborn sleep actually meant, which is to say, not sleeping, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered because new mothers answer everything. "Alicia," her voice was smooth as glass, "I understand you've been keeping my grandchild from her family. I gave birth 3 days ago, and yet you haven't reached out. My son had to find out he had a daughter." The word landed like a blade. "That is unconscionable. With respect, Janot, we're divorced. My medical decisions are mine." She hung up. I thought that was it. 4 days later, 2 police officers knocked on my door. I answered in pajamas with Emma in a carrier on my chest. They explained carefully, apologetically, that a welfare report had been filed. Someone was alleging I was denying the child's father access. Someone had provided my address, details about my postpartum situation, my lack of support network. I looked at those officers, my 3-day-old daughter asleep against my chest, and I felt something cold and very clear move through me. "Her father is Dr. Taylor Butler," I said. "We have no custody arrangement because he found out she existed 72 hours ago. Call him, call his lawyer, call mine." They called Taylor on my doorstep. And here is where something shifted. Taylor told them the truth. Immediately, no hesitation. The report was false. There was no custody order to violate. He wanted it handled through legal channels. The officers left with apologies. I called my lawyer. She said 4 words, "This saves us work." That evening, Taylor called me. "I'm sorry," he said. "No conditions, no, but she means well. Just, I'm sorry." "Are you?" I said. "My mother acted without my knowledge. I've spoken to her." "And?" A pause, then quieter, "I'm handling it." It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was different. For the first time since I'd known him, it was different. The custody process was exactly as exhausting as you'd expect. Mediation, DNA confirmation, unnecessary but legally required, a convention table that felt a mile wide, a mediator named Gerald Fenn who had heard every possible version of every possible story and remained utterly unshockable. "You both love this child," he said. "Start there." We started with supervised visits, 2 hours, weekly, a neutral center, a caseworker present. I agreed because my lawyer told me to, and because something small and buried in me, the part that had watched Taylor's face in that delivery room, believed he deserved the chance to become someone worth knowing. The first visit, Emma cried for an hour straight. She didn't know him. He was a stranger. I watched through the observation window as he walked and rocked and talked to her softly, and I waited for him to hand her back, to give up, to prove every instinct I had about him right. He didn't. He stayed. He kept going. He held her until she exhausted herself into sleep. I didn't let him see me watching, but I watched. By week 6, Emma stopped crying when he held her. By week 10, she smiled at him. By week 15, she reached for him first. And I felt something I hadn't expected. Not grief, not jealousy, just quiet, steady acceptance. He was her father. She deserved to know him. Whatever he'd done to me, that was simply true. 7 years is a long time to become a person. Emma is 7 now. Dark hair, strong opinions, a stuffed elephant named Gerald, after the mediator, though she'll never know that. She loves dinosaurs and swimming and informing me of scientific facts at dinner with the confidence of a tenured professor. She calls Dad, Dad, the way children say things that are simply true. I got the promotion, creative director. Bigger apartment, second bedroom covered floor to ceiling in glow-in-the-dark stars because Emma insisted, and I said yes because I always say yes to the things that matter. Taylor has his own place now, his own life, a clean distance from his mother that he built slowly and without fanfare. Janot hasn't met Emma. That's my line, and Taylor holds it without argument. Maybe someday. Not yet. Last spring, he dropped Emma off after a weekend visit. She'd already run inside. He stood in my doorway and said simply, "I'm sorry. No conditions, just, I'm sorry." I looked at him for a moment, this man I'd loved, grieved, watched grow into someone different through a one-way window at a family visitation center. "I know," I said. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Not telling me?" I thought about it honestly. "No," I said, "because if I'd told you then, you would have stayed for the wrong reasons, and Emma would have grown up watching her father who loves her out of a sense of duty." He was quiet for a long time. "She's the best thing that ever happened to me," he finally said. "I know," I said. "She is." I closed the door, found Emma at the kitchen table, homework ignored, Gerald tucked under one arm. "Mama," she said, not looking up, "did you know T-Rex couldn't actually run? It was more like a fast walk. Dad told me." "Is that true?" She looked up with complete seriousness. "I told my whole class, so it better be." I sat down beside her, helped with the homework, made dinner, did the bath, read the chapter, turned off the light. "Love you, Mama," she said, half asleep. "And Dad, and Gerald." "That's a good list," I said. I closed her door, stood in the hallway of the life I had built from nothing, from a kitchen table and a folder and a 2-line pregnancy test on a bathroom floor, and I thought about a delivery room at 7:03 in the morning, about a doctor lowering his mask, about the exact second I understood that some endings aren't disasters. Sometimes they're just the beginning of something you couldn't have imagined yet. I turned off the light. I went to sleep.
Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.